there will always be that little voice that says, are you sure you want to eat that? You kind of look fat today. You do look fat today. Hey guys, it's Nia. I am back. And I just wanted to kind of have like a little recovery talk with you guys and answer some questions that people have asked of people with eating disorders that they were uncomfortable asking, or they just couldn't find answers to. Just from my own point of view, I am not a doctor, but I am going through recovery right now, and I have gone through an eating disorder, so I feel like I can give my point of view on the subject at least. So I guess the first question would be, what keeps me motivated in recovery? When I first went into recovery, period, I actually Googled support groups in my area, and I went to one that I'd never been to before, and it was my first time ever being in any sort of environment for an eating disorder and knowing that I had an eating disorder. And it was kind of scary. I remember going to this group, and like the check-in was like, where's your anxiety? And mine was like at a 9 and out of 10. And at the end of the group, I remember my anxiety going down to like a 5, which was like amazing. I think that originally it started with just this desire to be done with all the pain that comes with recovery. And then going into treatment, it came from really just hating the behaviors, hating the mindset of having an eating disorder, and wanting all the pain to stop, wanting extra attention to the things that kind of just sucked. When I got out of treatment, that was when my motivation got really tested. It was no longer a matter of everyone watching you every day, everyone helping you every day. It was suddenly, I'm doing this by myself, and yeah, that's hard. It's really hard. Motivation looks different. I'm going to say that motivation looks different for each person at each time. And so for me to say the most motivated that I was in recovery, I don't know if that's true, because I'm still hanging in there, even though it's so much harder. But in treatment, I thought it was hard, but really it was kind of easy. But in treatment, my motivation was my therapist. I just really wanted to make her proud. I really wanted to make her happy. I really wanted to just do well so that she was happy and was proud of me, and so that I was like her favorite, I guess you could say. So that was my motivation in treatment. When I got out of treatment, there wasn't that ready motivation. There wasn't like me working towards goals as much. It was more like, you got to do it for you because there's no one else you can do it for. And that kind of crashed and burned a lot of times. I remember just saying to my friends, like, I need to do it for someone, because if I do it for me, it's not going to work. And that was really rough. So it's been a journey of trying to figure out how to do it for me, how to put me first, and how to know that I am worthy enough to want to be recovered, to be recovered. So lately, since I've moved, the motivation's been lacking. The motivation to follow my meal plan exactly has been lacking. The motivation to knock out eating disorder thoughts has been lacking. There was actually a point where I was full on considering relapsing just because dieting sounded better. So it's not like it always sounds great. It's not like recovery is always the best thing in your mind. We still struggle. We still aren't motivated a lot of the time, or some days, and sometimes we want to relapse too. So if you are in recovery, like, good job at you, because that shit is hard. So next question. What is the most inappropriate thing someone has said to me? So I actually remember this really well. I was telling certain people when I was going into treatment last year that I was going into treatment because I was leaving my job, and one of my coworkers that I did tell, I was kind of afraid to tell her, but she kept asking me where I was going, because I just said I was going on medical leave, and it was personal, but she really wanted to know, and we were kind of friends, and I sort of made the executive decision that I knew her well enough that I could say where I was going. So we were sitting down, and I told her that I had an eating disorder and I was going to treatment for it. And her response was, oh, well, I can't buy you food anymore. Because, like, earlier that week, she'd taken me to Starbucks and bought me a drink. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, you're just going to go throw it up. That still gets to me. I'm technically diagnosed with bulimia, but it's not a purge type. I don't throw up. I haven't thrown up since high school. So to say that, like, you're not buying me food, we can't spend time together in that way anymore because I'm going to throw it up, was, like, really upsetting. And the fact that there was just this, like, automatic assumption that because I have an eating disorder, I throw my food up was, like, so wrong, so upsetting, and just, I was like, no, that's not true. Like, I don't throw up. Like, of course, when you say, like, I don't throw up, like, in your mind, you're like, well, should I be throwing up? Like, am I really sick enough to be going to treatment in a week or so? And I just had to, like, explain to her what eating disorders were and how they worked and how not every eating disorder is the same. I think that was probably the most inappropriate thing anyone's ever said to me. Another question. Do I have an eating disorder because I think I'm unattractive? It's a good question. It's a very good question. Because I think that a lot of times people assume that eating disorders come from a society in which media is so rampant and stick thin models are prevalent. And no, that's not why my eating disorder started at all. So my eating disorder started in a time in my life when everything was going wrong, everything was in upheaval, everything was just, like, horrible for me as a kid. And, like, my dad died. I found out about new family members. We were moving. It was just like everything hit me at once. And I just started eating. My therapist at the time told me that I came into therapy with, like, some sort of candy. And I just sat there and started eating it and like, stared at her and dared her to say anything. Like, I didn't vocally dare her, but she said she felt like she was being dared to say anything about what was happening. And then after that, I just started showing up every week with candy or food of some sort, and I ate a lot. And I can remember walking to therapy on multiple occasions and sneaking food and hiding food, and it just kind of went from there. I started eating a lot of junk food. I started drinking soda. These are all things that are fine, by the way, in recovery. Like, these are not bad things. Like, you don't have to beat yourself up for them. But they were very uncharacteristic of the kid that I was. And then I started gaining weight because I've always struggled with my weight. Like, I've always been the kid who just wanted desperately to lose weight, no matter what. Even before I started gaining weight, I still wanted to lose weight. I think at first it was, like, dealing with my feelings and trying to stuff them down as best I could with food, and just loving food and just, like, wanting to eat all the food that I loved because what if it wasn't there? And then once I gained a large amount of weight, sort of more towards high school, that was when it started becoming, I need to lose weight, I need to diet to lose weight. And that was more a case of, like, feeling unattractive. And that was kind of like when the male gaze came in almost and told me that I was unattractive to men. So then it became about losing weight. And I think when I first realized that something was wrong and that I had an eating disorder, I was in college. And because eating disorders seemed like things people did to lose weight, and because they felt like they were unattractive, that's what I attributed my eating disorder to in my head. Even though that's not why it was started, that's not what it was really about. Anyone who has the mental status to have an eating disorder knows that there is something behind wanting to lose weight. It's not just wanting to lose weight. It's not just having low self-esteem or thinking you're unattractive. It's so much more, and it goes so much deeper. Okay, what's next? Why is it so hard to eat? So this question, I can agree with, and I can also speak to the opposite in terms of me personally. So for me, I thought that I didn't have a restrictive eating disorder type because eating for me didn't really feel scary a lot of the time. I love food. But it has to be the right food. I would eat a lot of foods that people considered fear foods, and I would binge on them, but I would also eat them moderately, like French fries. I love French fries. French fries are a fear food for a lot of people with eating disorders. But I would definitely like take myself out to dinner and go eat dinner. Like, it wasn't scary to eat sometimes. A lot of the times it was more fear around people watching me eat, fear around being around people while I'm eating. And then of course there were other fears in regards to eating, but I thought that it wasn't that bad because I wasn't like that afraid to eat. Not true. Totally not true. So at the same time, my restrictive eating disorder got really bad, and I would restrict a lot. That's what I've been going through for like the past year. It did become hard to eat. It became really hard to force myself to eat, and a lot of it came down to like, it has to be the right food. Like, if I'm not eating what I want to eat, I don't want to eat it. Or if it's not perfect, I don't want to eat it. I talked about that in my other vlog. It wasn't for any logical reason. I mean, it seems logical in my head. It seems like if the food is not great, why eat it? It's a waste of calories. So recovery has been learning to still eat food even though it's not perfect, even though I don't want to sometimes. If I were to eat only the food that I liked, I think I would go broke first, because it would only be eating out, and I cannot afford that. So that's one reason why I don't just eat whatever I want every single meal. And also, it doesn't stick to my meal plan. So I wouldn't be getting all the nutrients. Like, I would not eat vegetables. Yeah, I guess it is. It's hard to eat, but for me, in the conventional way of it's hard to eat, in the terms of like coming up with what my fear foods were in treatment was really hard, because I loved almost all the fear foods they asked me if I had a fear of. I also wanted to binge on a lot of those foods. I guess in that sense, they were scary, and that was kind of the conclusion that I came to, was that certain fear foods, it's not necessarily that you're afraid to eat them, but it's afraid that you're going to binge on them. And in that regard, I do have fear foods. Okay, so last question. If you're eating, are you recovered? And what is full recovery? I guess it's a two-part question. So I'm going to answer this from my point of view. Your point of view might be different. But if you're eating, that doesn't mean you're recovered. Sorry to burst that bubble. So even when I was eating consistently on a meal plan, I was still having all of this mental turmoil, and just, I was not happy with my body. I wasn't happy with eating. I wasn't happy with food. I'm still not. So like, don't think that's only in the past. Just because you're eating doesn't mean you're recovered, because eating disorders are a mental game. Like, it's a mental health disorder. In this regard, I'm talking about mental eating disorders and how they fucks with your brain. Just because you're eating doesn't mean that like all the mental stuff that's going on is fixed at all. So I get really annoyed with people who say that because someone's eating consistently on their meal plan, suddenly they're recovered, because that's not true. And then you've got this person who thinks that they're only recovered if they're eating perfectly. And then that person has a bad day or has a bad month and they're not eating perfectly. They're not following their meal plan. And suddenly they feel like they're not recovered, even though this whole time they've been having all of these eating disorder thoughts and stuff that are not being addressed. So I guess that takes me to the second part of what is full recovery. And I don't believe in full recovery, actually. I believe that you can be recovered from a certain state of mind. So I believe that I'm recovered from the state of mind of when I was going into treatment originally. but I don't believe that I will ever be in a perfect state of mind where there is no eating disorder voice and everything is harmonious and perfect. I think that to an extent I will always have an eating disorder voice. There will always be that little voice that says, are you sure you want to eat that? You kind of look fat today. You do look fat today. I know that I will hear those thoughts, but that they'll be quieter. And so I think that you can make a lot of progress in recovery, but I think that you're always going to be in recovery. I don't think that your life will be perfect and there will never be any eating disorder left. So that's my opinion of full recovery. I know that a lot of people disagree on whether there is full recovery or not. That's just my opinion. That's what I've learned in treatment. That's what I've learned from my friends and talking about things. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and go ahead and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And go ahead and hit subscribe, and there's a little bell if you want to get notified about when I post. So go ahead and do all the things down there. I would really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you guys for sticking with me. And I will see you guys next time.